James Harris III, continuing from page 13. He waves his hand in the air and says if they need somebody to sign autographs and take pictures with all the ladies, he'll be there. Marcel always thinks he's something, just because everybody in town knows his daddy owns Willie Q's Barbecue. I could pound Marcel's face in the barbecue with one hand if I wanted to. All right, Colin says, just as the bell rings. Anybody who wants to be a part of the project, be here after school on Monday. As I'm sliding out of the door in the middle of the other kids, Colin holds up my notebook and calls out, "Detention on Monday or here, James? Your choice." Yeah, right. Like I got any choice. Rondell. All the way home in the bus rain, I roll the word tetrahedron around in my mouth. I keep my face tuned toward the steamed up bus window and let my lips try the word over and over without using my voice. Tetrahedron. I wonder if this is one of those words that might get me into college someday. It sounds as if it could. Inside my mind, I keep a whole collection of college words for someday. Words like epiphany, quiescent, metamorphosis. My mom says it's okay to have dreams about going to college, but a person must face reality too. Reality is that nobody we know has ever gone to college, and I don't have any money to go with, and you have to be very, very smart or very lucky to get in. Sometimes I imagine college as a big wooden door where you have to knock and say the right password to get in. Only people who know big words like metamorphosis and epiphany are allowed inside. So I try to save all the words I can because maybe deep down I believe they will somehow get me inside college without money or luck. But around here, if you talk and act like that, you have dreams or you think you're better than everyone else, it only causes trouble. So I keep most of my college words locked up in my head, and I try to make it through each day by saying a few words as possible. She's quiet, is the way most people describe me, and I figure being quiet is just fine because it means you won't be bothered. As the bus rattles down Washington Boulevard with everybody shouting and shoving past my seat because I'm one of the last to be dropped off, I draw a little tetrahedron in the window steam in my finger, and I try to decide if being in Mr. Collins' contest will get me a step closer to my dream or not. Mr. Collins. When I'm asked why I started the Tetrahedron Project, I usually, but not always, give one of the following answers. 1, I don't exactly know why. 2, I'd been reading an article about the California school and their math record. 3, I was frustrated with my teaching, my school, my students, myself. 4, I was approaching my limit, or in mathematical terms, convergence. Number 5, all of the above. Sometimes I also admit, although starting the project was my idea, I never really expected any of my students to show up, and I didn't have a plan when they did. Charisse. 6 people are already in the math room when I get there on Monday. This kind of surprises me a little. I take a look around the doorway first because if it's the only me and Mr. Collins, I don't plan on sticking around. But then I see Ashley and Deandra from math class. They're hanging all over Terrell, how desperate can you be, and passing a bag of chips back and forth. Marcel is there too, acting like his usual self. He's sitting on the edge of Mr. Collins' metal desk, banging a rhythm on the side of it with his shoes. And James is in the corner near the windows, not paying attention to anybody, with his head down in his desk and the hood of his gray sweatshirt pulled up. Since I'm not crazy about Marcel, and definitely not James, I slide into the desk next to Rondell and thunk my backpack on the floor. "Hey, girl," I say, trying to be friendly, even though Rondell is a hard person to figure out. She's plain looking, but not in an ugly way, and she's smart, but not in a loaded over your head way, and she's friendly, but not in a real friendly way. "Hi, Charisse," she says, glancing up from quick book she's reading, and then back again. To tell you the truth, it kind of surprises me that she actually knows my name, because Rondell is one of those people who seem like they wouldn't be bothered with knowing people's names at all because they have too many other important things to think about. I take a stick of gum out of my purse, unwrap it slowly. Mr. Collins' room isn't much to look at. First of all, it's on the 3rd floor and the ceiling leaks. So there's always a couple of garbage cans in the middle of the room with the words "Do not move" written on them in permanent marker. And the blank walls drive me crazy whenever I'm sitting in class. If it was up to me, I'd fix the ceiling and hang up something, anything. That would be a big improvement. I can't decide if I'm coming to the math room is going to be any better than hanging around the Washington Boulevard Public Library day after day, with the librarians giving me their usual over-the-nose stares and asking me if I have some school stuff I should be working on. You see, foster non-parent number 5, Jolynn, doesn't always allow anybody at home when she isn't there. And since she isn't there most of the time, I'm not allowed to be there either. Which is why I mostly end up sitting in blue plastic library chairs or in the mall food court or riding around on the city bus or wherever I find a seat without too many weirdos or drunks around. After I pop gum in my mouth, Mr. Collins comes in the room. His face doesn't look real thrilled to see us. He goes straight to his desk and starts shuffling through stacks of papers and books like he always does before he starts teaching. This better not be a return to math class, I think to myself. Finally, he looks up, clears his throat, and says, "So, all of you are here to build a tetrahedron, right?" "No," a muffled voice calls out from the corner of the room. "Don't want to be here at all. Don't care about no stupid geometry." Mr. Collins doesn't answer James, but I notice his face gets a shade more red. "Well, this is the first time I've tried something like this, so all of us are going to learn as we go along," Mr. Collins continues in a not very confident sounding voice. "I'm going to put up a chart on the board and we'll get started." He then turns around the chalkboard and takes about 10 minutes to draw a big chart, using a yardstick to make every line perfectly straight and erasing any place where they cross over. Mr. Collins is one of those white teachers who looks like he never gets out of the sun much. He's soft looking in terms of muscles and kind of thin and light brownish hair and always parted too far to one side in my opinion. He writes the words tetrahedron teen at the top of the chalkboard and puts each of our names first and last on the chart. Of course, he spells my name with an E, Charisse, the same as he always does. I just shake my head thinking, Charisse, how come you can teach math and you can't remember a simple thing like that? As Mr. Collins fills his chart, I get the feeling that he doesn't have a clue about how to run after-school clubs. I've been in just about every club there is, because being in one means you don't have to attend after-school daycare. And if you don't need after-school daycare, it means your foster non-parents can keep more money they get for you. So I've been in a spelling club, a cheerleading club, brownies, foster parent, non-parent number 2 was head brownie, dramatics club, and even a hairstyle club. I'm almost an expert on clubs, you know. When the teacher finishes our names, I put up my hand. "You going to select a secretary and a president next?" I say, because I'm good at being secretary. Mr. Collins rubs his nose. "Sure, all right, let's do that." He writes secretary next to my name without even taking a vote. Marcel says he'll be president and Terrell wants to be vice president. "And I want to be vice president to the vice president," says Smart Mouth from the corner of the room. The teacher doesn't even argue with James. He just writes VP to the second next to James' name. I keep trying to help Mr. Collins, even though I don't know why. "Maybe we should make a list of supplies for the project," I suggest. "And I can write them down, since I don't know the first thing about building tetrahedrons." I get out a sheet of paper and wait for the teacher to tell us what we'll need. "Glue," he says. I look up. "What kind? Elmer's glue, rubber cement, or glue sticks?" "I don't know. We'll have to see," Mr. Collins answered in an uncertain voice. I don't think he does crafts very much. "What else?" I ask, writing a neat number 2 on my list. I'm a very neat person because most foster non-parents don't like messy kids. So I keep my clothes folded in the drawers and my bed always made. Hey, at least it gives them one nice thing to say about me. "A pattern, some type of tetrahedron pattern." "From where?" I ask. Mr. Collins rubs his eyes. "I don't know. We'll have to find one." "All right, number 3. Scissors," Mr. Collins says. Heavy paper. I write scissors and paper carefully on my list. "What color paper?" I ask. Deandra shouts out, "Red, red, red!" like it's the last color on earth. "White's cheaper than colored paper," I try to say, because I know a lot about how to get along on not much. For instance, nobody would notice my shirt is about 2 years old and a hand-me-down from one of my older foster non-sisters. I always iron my shirts with Jolene's iron so they look almost new. "What do we care about money?" Deandra shoots at me. "If we're going to be famous, who cares?" From the back of the room, James' voice again. "Rainbow colored?" he said, just being a smart mouth. "Why don't we get rainbow colored paper?" "All in favor of using rainbow colored paper," I say, because this isn't a bad idea, you know. Why not use all different colors if money doesn't matter? And everybody votes in favor except James, who doesn't vote at all. He tugs his hood tighter over his head and mumbles as we are a bunch of losers. Marcel tries to tell him to chill, but he gets in a pinch his arm for being dumb enough to say that to James Harris. Mr. Collins shuffles through his papers and pretends not to see any of it. Even with James Harris in the club and Mr. Collins not knowing much about running one, I have a good feeling about this as we get up to leave. I figure that working on something, even math, has got to be better than sitting in the mall or the Washington Boulevard Library day after day, waiting on Jolynn. You never know. Maybe I could turn out like the math club so much. foster non parent number 5 would come looking for me.